right, let's jump right in. When I was working on this episode for the Daily News podcast, I came across something really interesting. We're going to be looking at this news strategy that one of the political parties is using, and it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about this is, like you said, it's a strategy and it's focused on holding people accountable and it's about very specific things. So let's dive in.
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought was interesting as I was writing this episode of the Daily News podcast was that uh, there seems to be a real focus on economic issues. And I know that we hear about the economy all the time, but this feels different. There's talk of a $17 minimum wage and some pretty pointed comparisons to systems in other countries.
I think that's right. And what they're trying to do is tap into, I think, a very real concern that people have. And that is, the idea of economic fairness. Is the system rigged against certain people? Do certain people have an unfair advantage? And I think that's what they're trying to address.
Yeah, and I think that's why this idea of accountability is so central to their strategy. It's like they're saying, look, we're going to hold you to your promises. And they're doing it in a very public way. They're not shying away from confrontation.
And I think they're really trying to make the case that the other side is not doing enough to address these issues. They're saying, look, you're out of touch. You're not focused on the things that matter to everyday people.
Exactly. And they're really highlighting the struggles that people are facing.
Yeah.
The rising cost of living, the stagnant wages, the feeling that they're falling behind. It's a powerful message.
And I think it's a message that resonates with a lot of people. Everyone's feeling the pinch these days, and it's easy to feel like the system isn't working for you.
Right. And that's where someone like Senator Bernie Sanders comes in. He's really become a voice for the working class, and he's not afraid to speak truth to power. In the podcast script, I included this quote of his. It is a national disgrace that millions of full-time workers are living in poverty because they are earning starvation wages. It's a pretty strong statement.
It is, and it's very much in line with his broader message about income inequality and the power of corporations. He's been saying this for years, and it seems like his message is finally starting to resonate with a wider audience.
Yeah, and he's not just talking about it, he's actually proposing solutions like this push for a $17 minimum wage, which is a pretty bold move.
It is, and it's definitely going to be met with resistance from certain quarters, but it's a sign that he's serious about addressing these issues.
And it's not just Sanders. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, is also talking about the need for an affordable economy for all. He's focusing on things like housing, healthcare, childcare, and utilities, all the things that are squeezing families.
I think what Jeffries is doing is connecting those broader economic issues to people's everyday lives. It's not just about abstract numbers. It's about the fact that people can't afford to put a roof over their heads or pay for their kids' health care.
Exactly. And he's putting a human face on these issues in the podcast script. I included this line of his. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, it is unacceptable that so many hardworking people are living paycheck to paycheck. It's a reminder that even in a country as rich as ours, there are still people who are struggling to make ends meet.
And it raises the question of why that is. Why are so many people struggling in a country with so much wealth?
And that's a question that the Democrats are trying to answer with their new strategy. They're saying that the system is rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful, and they're proposing policies to level the playing field.
And it'll be interesting to see how those policies are received. Will they be seen as realistic solutions or just empty promises?
That's the big question, and it's something that we'll be exploring in more depth as we continue our deep dive.
So stay tuned, folks, because this is just the beginning.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve even deeper into this new strategy and what it means for the future of the country. It's interesting, though, because when I was writing this episode, I was thinking about these programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. They're such a big part of the safety net for so many people.
Yeah, and, they're often framed as entitlements, but I think Jeffries is trying to reframe that time. He's saying that these are earned benefits. People have paid into these programs their whole lives, and they deserve to receive the benefits.
Right. It's not like they're getting something for nothing. And I think that's an important distinction to make, especially when you're talking about programs that are so vital to people's well-being.
Yeah, because, there's always this debate about the role of government. Should the government be providing these kinds of safety nets, or should people be responsible for themselves? And I think that's a debate that's not going away anytime soon.
Right. And it's a debate that's often very heated, but I think Jeffries is trying to strike a more balanced tone. He's saying that we need to protect these programs while also making sure that they're sustainable for the long term.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot. between providing for people's needs and being fiscally responsible. And that's not always easy to do.
No, it's not. But I think it's an important goal to strive for, and it's something that I think a lot of people can agree on, regardless of their political affiliation.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, these are programs that benefit everyone, whether you're directly receiving benefits or not. We all have a stake in making sure that these programs are there for the people who need them.
And speaking of things that benefit everyone, let's talk about immigration reform, because that's another issue that Jeffries has been vocal about. He's calling for a balanced approach,
Yeah.
one that recognizes the contributions of immigrants while also addressing border security concerns.
Yeah. The immigration debate is so complex and it's often very divisive. But I think Jeffries is trying to find some common ground. He's saying that we need to be both compassionate and realistic. And I think that's a message that a lot of people can get behind.
Yeah, because I think most people would agree that we need to have a system that works.
Yeah.
One that's fair and humane, but also one that protects our borders.
Exactly. And it's not an either proposition. We can do both. And I think Jeffries is trying to make that case.
Right. And he's even pointing out the economic benefits of immigration. Immigrants are starting businesses, creating jobs, and contributing to our economy in countless ways.
And they're often doing the jobs that nobody else wants to do. The tough jobs, the dangerous jobs, the jobs that are essential to our economy, but that a lot of people don't want to do.
Right. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked in the immigration debate. The fact that immigrants are playing a vital role in our economy and our society.
Yeah, they're not just taking jobs, they're creating jobs, and they're enriching our culture in countless ways.
And I think that's something that we need to celebrate, not demonize.
Exactly, because diversity is a strength, not a weakness.
And speaking of strength, let's talk about the Democrats' new messaging strategy, because that's something that really caught my eye as I was working on the podcast script.
Oh, yeah. What'd you think?
Well, it seems like they're really focused on clarity and consistency. They want their message to be easy to understand and resonate with voters.
Yeah, I think they've realized that in today's political climate, you have to be able to cut through the noise. There's so much information out there, so many different voices, and it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. So I think they're trying to simplify their message and make it more memorable.
Yeah, it's almost like a marketing campaign.
Yeah.
They're coming up with a catchy slogan and repeating it over and over again.
Exactly. And, that can be effective, but it also runs the risk of sounding hollow. If you're just repeating a slogan without any substance behind it, people are going to see through that.
Right. It has to be authentic. It has to be grounded in reality, and it has to be something that people can believe in.
And that's the challenge for the Democrats. Can they come up with a message that is both simple and compelling? A message that connects with voters on an emotional level, but also has some substance behind it.
Yeah. And that's where this new mantra comes in.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Always be campaigning.
Yeah.
It's catchy, it's memorable, and it gets to the heart of their strategy.
Yeah, it's like a battle cry. They're rallying the troops and getting ready for a fight.
Exactly. And they're making it clear that they're not going to back down. They're going to fight for what they believe in, and they're going to do it with a clear and consistent message.
And it'll be interesting to see how that message is received.
Yeah.
Will it resonate with voters or will it fall flat?
That's the big question, and it's something that we'll be watching closely.
So stay tuned, folks, because this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting approach because on the one hand, it's very strategic. Like they're trying to create a brand almost. But on the other hand, I wonder if it's a little bit cynical.
Yeah.
Are they just trying to manipulate voters?
That's a good question. I think there's always a tension in politics between being strategic and being authentic.
Yeah. Right.
You want to win elections, but you also want to be true to your values.
And you want to connect with voters on an emotional level, but you don't want to talk down to them.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes this new strategy so fascinating to watch. Because it's not clear yet whether it's going to work.
I think a lot of it depends on whether they can actually deliver on their promises.
Yeah.
Because if they can't, then people are going to see right through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk the talk, but you also got to walk the walk.
Yeah. And I think voters are smarter than they're often given credit for.
Right.
They can smell BS a mile away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Whether this new strategy is going to be enough to win back voters or whether it's just going to backfire.
Only time will tell, but I think it's a really important moment in our political history,
Right.
We're at a crossroads, and the decisions that are made in the next few years are going to have a huge impact on the future of the country.
That's a really good point. And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping that future. You know,
Absolutely.
we can't just sit back and let things happen. We have
Yeah.
to be engaged, we have to be informed, and we have to hold our leaders accountable.
Yeah, and I think that starts with having these kinds of conversations,
Right.
talking about the issues, debating different perspectives, trying to understand where each other is coming from.
And being willing to change our minds, when presented with new information.
Absolutely, because none of us have all the answers.
Right? We're all learning and growing and evolving.
And that's what makes this whole process so exciting.
Right.
It's a journey and we're all in it together.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great note to end on. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with one final thought. Keep asking questions, keep challenging assumptions, and keep searching for the truth.
That's great advice.
And thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time.
See ya!